Hi, I'm Pam, and I would like to welcome you to the Live Authentically show. My team and I help other people step into their authentic realities via a number of different modalities. This show is obviously one of them. We also have a Facebook group at liveauthentically.today/FB, and we would love to have you join us. We are a group of like-minded individuals who are committed to spiritual growth and transformation. So go over there and take a look and join us. I'm also super pumped that I have just released my first book. It's called Soar, and it's on Amazon. It's now available in audiobook, Kindle, and paperback. And it's an experiential spiritual journey through my divorce process and shows how I partnered with the universe to create my new reality. In addition to my podcast, my Facebook group, and my book, I also work with individual clients and groups as well. So go ahead and check that out. You can go to liveauthentically.today. And I'm super pumped that today I have with me Dr. Robert Puff. He is the author of 13 books. 13, yes, you did hear that correctly. A TV show host, Psychology Today blogger, and a corporate trainer. And he is here today to talk to us about happiness. So thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, Pamela. It's great to be here.
Yeah, it's an honor to have you here. I'm super excited to hear all about you and your journey. But one thing that we're going to do first is we're going to start the show off with the same question. I start off my shows with the same question, and that is, drum roll, are you ready?
We'll see.
All right. What does it mean to you to live authentically every day?
I would say when I'm still and my ego is very quiet, then I'm living authentically. So I often describe it, I'm a big meditator. I've been meditating for over 30 years. And I learned to get very quiet in meditating. But then I learned that I could also, when I get off the mat, if you want to call that, off the chair, that I could stay quiet throughout the day and not have so much kind of ego thoughts going through, is this good, is this bad? And just flowing with life, kind of like a young child would. I call it kind of being not childish, but childlike. Just really savoring life, seeing it well, seeing it for the first time, and really experiencing life anew every day. And when I do that, I feel like I've lived authentically.
I love that. I love your answer. I'd love you to to go back and sort of hit the rewind button and take me back to a place, if there was one, place or a time where you didn't live authentically, And can you tell me what that looked like, what that felt like?
Yeah, it was, I went to school, after I finished high school, I went to school for 14 straight years and got a lot of degrees. And I was very kind of success oriented, I would call it.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized that, I remember one time I was actually studying on the East Coast at one of the schools I was getting my degrees at. And it was a beautiful day, and I was laying on the grass, and I looked up at the clouds, and I realized I'd been here for 3 years, finishing up a master's at Princeton, and I never stopped. I was just so busy, and I said, I need to change this. I need to start living, in your words, more authentically, because I was very kind of achievement oriented. I wanted to, save the world, change the world, whatever words you want to do, want to make a difference. But in the process, I wasn't living. When I realized I can do better if I live and help others versus helping others and not living, that's when I began to change. So.
And what were your degrees and what did you study?
I have my undergraduate was in psychology and philosophy. Then I got a master's in comparative religion. Then I got a master's and PhD in clinical psychology. And then I had a 2-year postdoc in psychology. Yeah.
Wow. So what did it feel like when you were living in that inauthentic place? Can you take me back to that time and just share with me some of the thoughts that you had? Can we go into more depth about that? Because I really want to drive this point home, because I think that so many people are living in an inauthentic place, but don't realize it, right? It's not a judgment, just more of an observation. And this is all about bringing an awareness to what that feels like and sounds like and looks like, so that people can start to pay attention and start to make changes in their life to get them to an authentic place. So I'd love to hear more about some of your thoughts that you were having.
Yeah, I remember one of the big things I saw was the way I interacted with the world. I mean, I felt like life was going well, but I remember once it was Christmas time, and I was very busy doing my academic achievement, and I had to go to the mall to buy some presents, and I hadn't been to the mall for literally months. And when I
Mhm.
got there, a guy pulled out in front of me. I had to slam on my brakes in the parking lot, and because he could have caused an accident. He was just driving very, I felt very inappropriately. So I got out of my car, and he just rolled up his windows, and I went and I banged my fist on top of his roof, and I left a dent. I thought, I'm not as happy as I think I am. I'm not doing as well as I thought I was. So I realized that, okay, yes, I'm achieving. I was graduating with honors. I was doing all these things, but inside I had this anger, and I realized, wow, what's this about? And I said again, it was that inside. I need to change this. It looked good, kind of externally looked good,
Wow.
but it wasn't productive. It wasn't serving the other people in my life well. And again, it was one of those aha moments. I said, I need to change. The anger, but at that time, because there was just so much stress, so much achievement. My big thing, I think, if you have an addiction, we all kind of struggle with addictions. Mine was success, and that just wasn't serving me well. And I said, it's time to begin to change that.
That's great. Congratulations. I'd like to talk more about success and what your barometers were for measuring success. Because I'd like to draw some attention to this because I know so many people, and again, not a judgment, just an observation, measure their success based on egoic barometers,
Yeah.
right? Degrees, status, money, the bank account, whether or not they have the corner office, the house, the car, that stuff. That's how we're conditioned, right? That's how society kind of conditions us. So I'd love to hear what were your barometers for measuring success during that time?
Well, for me, it was, the titles were important. I think doing better than my colleagues. I'm doing as much as I could, and it was kind of tricky because I wanted to help people. Even back then, I knew I wanted to help people, but it was a sense of me helping people meant that I had to influence a lot of people. And the irony was that caught me. It was a catch because it made it so that I, again, wasn't living well. I was making a difference, but
Yeah.
at the expense of my own health, at the expense of my own life. And I realized, you can make a difference without necessarily sacrificing so much, because as much as the whole world mattered, my heart mattered too. And as much as I wanted to make a difference by, being number one in my degrees, or becoming like the top psychologist in my field, or, like you, I create a podcast, creating the number one podcast. I realized all those things were really detrimental in the sense that they weren't, again, I like your words, living authentically. They kept me from living well now. And what I've learned is we can make a difference, but first we really need I feel we need to take care of ourselves first. So I get up every day and I meditate an hour and a half every morning. And then like this morning, I went and swam for an hour and a half. So before I even started my day, before I do anything, I make sure I'm okay. And then when I'm okay, I've learned that everything else kind of flows. I can't get as much done sometimes. I just do them more as a rhythm. And the cool thing that I found was a neat thing that I found, kind of going to the solution quickly, but you can accomplish a lot. I mean, like you said, I have done, if you go to my website, you see I've done all kinds of things, but I just plug at them. I call it because I really love what I do. And it is fun to make a difference and help people and help myself in life. And I share what I learned. And so I've just learned that, and I do keep my life simple. That helps too. So when you don't have major mortgages or expenses, I'm not much of a thing person. I'm more of a kind of an experienced person. I love to explore and travel the world and meet wonderful people, kind of more my calling. So that helps. And great thing about that is if you don't have the money, you just don't have to travel. But if you have a mortgage, you still got to keep paying that mortgage, So just learning to keep the life simple. I mean, I haven't bought a new car. I have decent cars, but I haven't bought a new car since my son was born, which is like, he's 18 now. So it's, I buy used cars. They're nice, but they're used, So just little things like that keep my life less stressed. I really am pretty religious about taking every Friday, Saturday, Sunday off. I don't work. I actually was on retreat all weekend by myself, a silent retreat, which I go usually every other month. And just doing those things, because the things that I was doing, I felt my kind of identity came from, if enough people thought, wow, this guy's great, then I must be great. And I realized that everyone's great. You just need to live well now.
Right. I love that. And I'd love to take a sort of expound a little bit on something you just said. If everybody thinks I'm great, then that means that I'm great. And I think that I'd love to really talk about that and go deep here, because that is just so common. I mean, that's such a common state of mind is, when we look for that external validation, again, cultural, comes from society, right? We're constantly looking to others for validation. So, what can people do to start that shift, to start to make that journey from coming from a place of relying or looking or seeking that external validation to realizing that everything comes from within, right? I mean, you can go within and you can achieve that same feeling. And in fact, it's longer standing and it's sustainable and it stands the test of time if we learn how to anchor on our worth and our value internally. So I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, there's many paths to that, but one of my favorite is what I call kindness. When we're kind, it creates a sense of love and compassion for others.
Yeah.
So, kind of when we're out and about and in our lives and we see someone and we have that tendency, our mind kind of has that tendency to judge them. Instead, we could say, is there something beautiful about them that I could focus on, something, gentle? And when we begin to do that with people that we interact with, whether they be black, white, short, tall, successful, non-successful, homeless, or, a billionaire, we see them all as just beautiful people. The great thing about that is then we begin to do that to ourselves. What I've learned is when I stop judging others, I stop judging myself. For me, one of the big keys of kind of self-acceptance and not needing that is kindness. Just everyone, even I know people do really bad things. I get that. I'm not in any way excusing what they do. But I have never met a person that, yes, this person may have needed to be in jail the rest of their life, what they did, but
Yeah.
I could still find something beautiful in them. I mean, their circumstances caused them to be there. I really think boundaries are super important, but I think kindness, treating people kindly, especially not just verbally, but especially in our minds. When we really go around and seeing the gentleness and beauty in other people, we'll do the same to ourselves, because the person we always judge the harshest in life is ourselves.
Yeah.
We can't fool anyone else. We are who we are. We're doing our best, and maybe we can do better, but we're doing our best. And I think with that gentleness and that kindness, it motivates. It actually motivates me to do better, because instead of feeling shame for when I mess up, more like, oh, I messed up. And I have this thing I like to say, what can I learn from this?
Yeah.
What did I do bad? But what can I learn from this and do better next time, maybe.
Right. I think that's such a game changing question that really helps us make that shift from a place of judgment to a place of non judgment. Because that's what this is about, right? This journey, this spiritual journey, it's about learning, right? It's about becoming a better version of the person that we were the prior day. That's really all this is about. It's not about us against our neighbor, us against our friends, up against our coworkers. We're each on our individual journey. And if we look at the world through those lenses, right, through those lenses of what can I learn from this, right, then the game totally changes. Then we're coming at things from the soul rather than the ego, which is rooted in competition and is rooted in judgment and is fueled by all of those things. So I love it. You've hit on so many topics already that I feel like, do you have a few hours today instead of just an hour? I'm trying to figure out which direction. My mind is like going in a million different directions, where we want to go next. But I'd love to go back to that aha moment, kind of that epiphany where you said, you know what? I think something needs to change here. That like fist banging moment where you said, you know what? I'm really enraged. I'm really harboring a lot of anger. I'd love to unpack this because I know anger is something that a lot of people deal with. And I'd love to hear you talk about it. I mean, I know anger is a kind of it's that fight or flight instinct, right? It's that secondary emotion that covers up those more vulnerable emotions underneath. So I'd love to hear you talk about anger and how people can begin the process of moving towards peace. I know it's complex. I know there are many paths, but I'd love to hear your reflections on that.
Yeah, again, people teach me along the way. I remember many, many years ago, I met this very kind person, and I thought, wow. I mean, we'd hike together. We loved being outdoors. We were kind of going to school together. And I thought, I knew her pretty well. And at one point I said, I don't ever see you get angry. Do you just not get angry? And she said, no, I get angry. I just work at it. And so what it is, and again, another story I'd like to share because it's an important one. And all of you have heard of this person. I got the privilege of meeting Mr. Rogers and his wife one time. And, I spent a lot of time talking to them and stuff, and he truly is who he is. But later his wife was saying that, Mr. Rogers or, Fred is the way he is because he works at it every day. He works at it. I have a right to my feelings.
Yeah.
I feel angry. But the big question is, what do I want to do with it? Do I want to punch someone? Do I want to hit someone? Do I want to say some mean words? Or
Mhm.
maybe want to go for a long walk? Do I maybe want to scream into a pillow? Do I maybe want to journal? Do I maybe want to call up a friend? Say, God, what my spouse did or what my kid did made me really angry. I don't want to lash out at them, but I do need to talk about it. So we
Mhm.
share our feelings, and then we feel better. And then I think when we feel better, then we can decide what we want to do with that other person that made us angry. Or do we want to just let it go? Do we want to say, hey, when you did this, I wonder if we can come up with this is other paths of dealing with it when this happens. So you come up with a plan. And then when you have a plan, and the plan being first, I'm going to pause. I'm not going to suppress my anger. I think, okay, now that I pause, maybe take a break. My favorite thing is taking a break. Just say, okay, I'm angry. I'm going to go for a walk. Great. Then we come back, and if we need to talk about it, great. Or we're at the supermarket and someone does something that's very rude, we can get angry back at them if we want. Or we can say, I'm sure they're having a bad day. And, I do a funny thing I do is when I'm at the quote, quote, supermarket and the clerk or someone in front of me behind me being really not very nice, I will once in a while, and periodically, I don't know how often, but I've done it many, many thousands of times, literally. I'll say, is everything okay? And 90% of the time, 90, something isn't okay.
Yeah.
They broke up with their boyfriend, the person before them was really rude to them. They don't feel well. So, when you get that, it doesn't excuse what they're doing to us. I get that. Another example I like to give is, if you look at everyone, when we grew up, probably knew someone that was really that was mean, was just like, wow, you are not a nice person. We all know people like that, right?
Right.
And I say, use history, go back and try to find out how they turned out. How did their lives go? That anger has consequences to it. It's like a poison that poisons themselves most because usually they're drug addicts, suicidal, or dead. That's what usually happens when people are really bad. And so what happens with that is you realize, okay, there does seem to be some sense of fairness in life, and I don't want to drink that poison. Anger can be a poison if I lash out on people. I'd rather be kind and just walk away and work on if I'm like me, when I hit that car, I said, okay, wow, I'm not well. I didn't judge myself. I thought, there's something going on here. And that gentleness, that kindness allowed me to say, okay, I need to not try so hard. So I was actually, after I finished my master's, I went on to my doctorate. And a fun story was, I got into therapy, which was really helpful. I really got into hiking and being outdoors. And when I started my program, there were about 30 of us in my doctorate program. I had about 10 people that would go hiking with me. At the end of the program, because it was a very rigorous program, I kept doing it all the way through because I had a great therapist. She said, just go hike, go take time, have fun. And I did. I really enjoyed it. And she said, at the end, not one of them had time to hike anymore. So I met new people to hike with, new friends. So life can get us really busy. And when we're busy, we're probably going to get grumpy or we're going to get sick. And, it's probably better to just slow down and really, really this phrase, I know it's a platitude, but it's a really good one. Smell the roses
Yeah.
all the way, every day. It's super cool. And it makes life so if the day isn't going well, you can redirect your attention towards the roses, take a deep breath and say, life is good.
Yeah, I love that. That's so beautiful. And I'd like to echo that. Life really is in the journey. I think so many times we're so destination focused, right? We're so hurried. We're so scurrying around trying to get to the destination, thinking that we'll be happy when we achieve that place. And and it's frustrating when you keep checking off boxes and you're not moving up the scale in terms of happiness. So I'd love to take that kind of take that thought as a springboard to my next question for you is how do you define happiness?
Hmm. Well, my podcast I create is called the Happiness Podcast. And everyone always says, you talk a lot more about contentment and peace than you do happiness. I said, well, that's true, but probably wouldn't be as popular if it was called the Contentment or Peaceful Podcast. But it is a sense of, it's a sense of how I end. One of the ways I end it is I always say at the end, every single one of them, I always say, accept what is, love what is. There's a real sense of embracing life. I know sometimes it's like, blah, I want to embrace this cancer. I want to embrace that my husband is dying. I want to embrace that, my kids are failing in school or doing drugs, and it can still be well. It
Right.
can still be okay in the sense if we're doing everything we can to focus on helping them be better, helping us be better. Most of that takes very little time. When we go through a crisis, it literally may take 5% of our day. I even use the example of a person that has gone through, because I work with people who have gone through horrific childhoods. And when they're working through the process of healing from that, they can really spend about 5% of the day, maybe an hour working on healing that. If they do more than that, they get overwhelmed that it's too much. So the rest of that 24 hours should be spent, or 23 hours should be spent on enjoying life, living in the present, meditating, being in nature, connecting with friends. So what happens with it is that I think happiness is that sense of just really embracing life and saying, this is what I have right now. I can work towards change, but this is what I have. How do I accept this? And not only that, love this. How do I love what I have right now and say, wow, this is cool. I like this.
I love that. So not only accepting it, but actually loving it and embracing it.
Yeah, even the hard stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. And, I think that's, I love that because it makes me think about, the flow, living in this state of flow. And I think I found from my journey that, one of the best things I ever learned to do was just learn to flow with life, just embrace whatever's happening. I think so many times we hold ourselves, we kind of suppress ourselves in a state of discontentment or misery or whatever you want to call it, because we're constantly pushing against what life is sending us, right? And we're constantly comparing ourselves to where we thought we would be or trying to push away certain experiences. But I found that, you can achieve peace when we process life as it is, not as we thought it should be. So I'd love to hear you talk a little bit about how people can start to make shifts into that place of flow, into that place of accepting and embracing when life gets really hard.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite thing is meditation. I really feel we all would benefit by meditating more.
Mhm.
Finding a place to sit and be still. What that does, it allows you to kind of see what's going on in here and learning to quiet a bit. I mean, that's a big one. I think the other one is just, realizing life is impermanent. One of the big lessons of life is life changes.
Yeah.
And if you fight that change, you're gonna crash and burn. I use the example, for any of our sports. I'm not a sports fanatic, but I've studied sports psychology. And in the football world and U.S. football world, there's a player called Jerry Rice. He played for the 49ers. He was considered one of the best receivers in history.
Mhm.
And the thing that was known about him that was unique was he just never got injured. And I don't even know anything about a receiver. They're running really fast. They jump up in the air. They catch a ball, and then someone hits them, whether 6 feet off the ground, and they come crashing to the ground. You think they should have horrible injuries, and he didn't. So people like him, there's others like him. We as psychologists interview them and say, "How did you do that? How did you not get injured?" He said, "When I jumped up and someone hit me, I relaxed." A drunk driver, how do they always walk away from an accident sometimes and everyone else gets killed? Because they're relaxed. So that sense of relaxation in life, and I'm not encouraging anyone to drink. That wasn't my point of that example. But that sense of just realizing life does change, and that's okay. We all know we're going to die. That's a guarantee. So why
Right.
would we fight that so much? Because it happens. Very famous people die, and friends die. The people that we love die, and then careers change, our bodies change, our relationships change. That is part of life. Our kids grow up, they go off to college, they get their own places. That's the change of life. If we flow with that, like the word you used earlier, remember you said flow.
Right.
Flow comes from acceptance that, again, life does change, and that's okay. And what I do is what I would say to myself is, when that changes, now what in my world is beautiful, and how do I focus on that? I might be 80 years old in a nursing home, and I really like the nursing staff that works with me. Or I might be, 90 years old, dying in my bed, but I love hearing the birds with the window open. I may
Yeah.
be 25, and dropped out of school, can't even find a job, but I can hang out with my friends and still enjoy what's before me. I may be wanting to be an awesome musician, but I can't. I'm not making it. So I say, okay, do I enjoy my music? Am I still enjoying what I'm creating? And do I play for my friends? And that's okay. It's a sense of acceptance, whether you make a huge difference on the world, whether everyone thinks you're awesome, or if you're just quietly sitting in a corner, both are okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's accepting that. It's really acceptance is so much of life is because what happens is we create what's called attachments. We want things to be a certain way. And
Yeah.
when they're not a certain way, we get upset, we get angry. And when we let go of those attachments and say instead, I have preferences. I prefer this to happen. I prefer to have children someday, but maybe I can't. I would prefer to keep my job for 30 years, but maybe I can't. We can
Yeah.
have preferences. So when it does change, we're okay. And if it doesn't change, we're okay. Because we
Mhm.
realize life does change and we just have preferences. But when we hang on to things tightly, then we're going to suffer. So, this is what life gives me, then we're better.
Yeah, I love that. One of the phrases I always say is, "I'm detached from outcomes and time frames." Right? I'm detached.
Right?
Then I learn to flow with life, and then I learn to accept what the universe sends me. And I always caveat, I always have my manifestation kind of going on behind the scenes, and I always have my eye on some target or another. But I always give the universe the license to surprise me. Right? I always give it the license and the space and the grace to deliver what's in my highest good. So I always just say, "This is what I prefer." Like you use the word preference. This is what I prefer, but I trust that you'll give me what's in my highest good. And that may or may not be congruent with what I want for myself. And then all of a sudden, there's just this sense of release, right? Just releasing that attachment, releasing expectations. And then that's when you learn to just flow and just anchor back and just appreciate what you have in the moment. Every moment is fleeting, and there are no two moments in our lives that are exactly identical. And we've all experienced, how our life can be turned upside down, through a phone call or receiving some news or a diagnosis. And it really is, we all just have this one day. So once we really embrace the idea that nobody's tomorrow is guaranteed, we really learn to live in the moment, and the present is just so much sweeter.
My neighbor, who lives literally right across the street from me, and I've lived here for like almost 10 years now. I never met her. She would only come out in her PJs and drop her garbage off and go back in immediately. I just never saw her.
Mhm.
And then one day, ambulance came and she was gone. And I finally asked someone, I said, what was her story? And what had happened was her husband had died, and she was my age, and she drank herself to death. And yet, so that's one path that we can do. And lots of people do that path. When things don't work out the way we do, we can numb them. I think numbing is
Right.
a very common experience for lots of people. But then the other thing, the beautiful part that I've seen is that when I meet people that I, think shine, and there's some people out there that really shine, I
Mhm.
always ask them, how did you get here? How did you end up, turning out this beautifully? And they'll always give me the same answer. They say suffering. They went through a hard time like my neighbor did. And instead of turning it into something bad, they turned it into something beautiful. So,
I love that. When you were talking about that, it reminded me of the Buddhist phrase. You've probably heard of it. Pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. And I
right,
think it's so important to, again, recognize when you're in that place of suffering, and then, make choices, right? When you, again, going back to that incident with the car and you were banging your fist, you made a choice, right? Life is all about choices. And you made a choice that, what, I want to change, I want to shift. And I think that that's so important. I'd love to hear you talk about just personal responsibility in this, because I think so many people just kind of wait. And, I'd love to hear you talk about, just again, how people can make that shift and how they can own that, how the onus is really on them to start to make the shift.
it's effort. I mean, again, we study anyone who's very successful at what they do. From Oprah Winfrey to like whoever you like, they work at it. But I
Yeah.
think it's the same thing, the exact same thing with this. You know, when we work at things, we get good at them, and this being living life well is something we can work on. And so if we spend time saying, okay, I want to make my life better. So you listen to podcasts that you create, like Pamela creates. You study with people that are doing it right, and they have learned things, and you say, okay, this is what they do. Now it's going to be hard. So, if I use the example, if you're a 300-pound couch potato and you want to become a marathon athlete, it's not going to happen overnight. You need to make small changes. And kindness. I'm always going back to kindness. So might the first day you say, okay, I want to get better. So I'm going to walk around the block. And I came back and I'm exhausted. I'm pooped and I'm tired. And you could say, wow, I can't even walk around the block. What's wrong with me? That's not kind. Or you could say, wow, I walked around the block. I'm going to do that again tomorrow. I might even do a block and a half. And see the differences. What's more motivating, to have someone saying you're stupid or what's wrong with you, or someone to say, just do better. This is hard. The life that you and I've created, we both know it's work. You
Right.
know, challenge. You have to work at, not in a bad sense, but it's just work. It's like, like anything, when you work at things to become successful at it, it takes a lot of tenacity. It takes sticking to it. There's things you have to do. And when other people after a long day may want to come home and like drink into oblivion, or whatever they may do to numb. I'm going to come home and meditate or go for the gym, work out. It's choices that we make. And so given that we make those choices, it gets better, but it's that commitment. And with that commitment and effort, and then with kindness, we can get better. But and here's why I think can really help with the kindness. Why are we the way that we are? To me, it's very simple. It's through our conditioning. We are a product of our genetic conditioning and our environmental conditioning, period. But the one thing that we can change is our conditioning. Right now, everyone that's listening to us is having a shift. They're seeing things differently. And with that change, they can say, oh, I get it. I'm getting new conditioning. So if you spend, say, like if you say you do like a lot of people right now are doing, you call that, forgot the term for, where you watch a show for hours on end. I can guarantee you're going to have a very different affect from that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of like our mind is like our food. When we eat fresh, organic fruits and vegetables, our body's like that. When we take in positive, beautiful thoughts, our mind's like that. When we're judging others, our minds don't like that. Then we create that judge. So this is work, and the gentleness comes from, you notice, oh, wow, I spent maybe 90% of the day being critical. So tomorrow I'm going to work on maybe 85%. And then with that kindness, that encouragement, and being around people that encourage you. I mean, why does AA work? Because they're around people that support them. Why does this work? Because you and I create places where people can get support. So, you often need, like yourself and I, counselors to help you through it.
Right.
But it's worth the effort. It's worth the work. And if you do it, what you get, all the other things you're trying to do, from whether you're numbing yourself, whether you're achieving a lot, whether you're trying to find relationships to make you happy, none of them will work, because those are a path to happiness. Why not make the goal just to be happy?
Right. Yeah, I love that. I'd love to go back to the scenario a little while ago in the podcast. You talked about, when someone's doing healing work, they do healing work for, what did you say, like a half hour, an hour, give or take. And then the rest of the day, they should be enjoying themselves, connecting out in nature, just nourishing their bodies, etc. I think, what words of advice or encouragement do you have for people who are feeling really low, people who are feeling like they're at rock bottom in some way, shape, or form? Because I've been through some challenging experiences, and I know for me that when something really big and catastrophic is going on, it's really hard for me to compartmentalize and say, okay, this portion of the day I'm going to dedicate to my healing, and the rest of the day I'm just going to go frolic off and, enjoy it. I've been through a divorce, I've been through child loss. I mean, those clouds like hovered over me for a while, and it was very hard for me at certain points to carve out any moments of enjoyment during the day. What words of encouragement or advice or wisdom can you say to the person who is feeling like whatever challenging experience they're going through right now is completely overtaking their existence?
It is work. I'm going to go back to that one. It's work, but it's a work that works. And so, yes, sometimes, again, that 100% thing I was talking about earlier, if it's 5% better, that is better.
Yeah.
If it's a 5% improvement, it's like, okay, today I was 5% less wanting to kill myself. So then you say, well, what helped me today? Was it reaching out to a friend? Was it being in nature? Was it going for a walk? I mean, the things that work actually work well, but initially, kind of like, if you eat fried food all the time, and then you start eating, fruits and vegetables, initially no, I don't like that. But with time, you get used to things. So what happens with it is the dark place when you get to those dark places, you actually are reinforcing it with your thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
So you say, okay, so how do I begin to change them? And when you change them, then that you begin to change. So the beautiful thing becomes is that you realize that I just need to keep going through this, and I will get better. So there's hope, and hope, I think, can come from learning from people that have gone through what you've gone through,
Mm-hmm.
and then say, okay, what do they do? So what we'll do is every day to keep that despair, we're reinforcing it. We're having thoughts in our head that reinforce that despair. And if we start saying, is this good for me to be thinking about, looking at the divorce papers over and over again and thinking about what I'm going to lose? Or is it better for me to go have lunch with my best friend? Is it better for me to go for a walk? Is it better for me to read a book? Is it better for me to do something else that changes these thoughts, so that at the end of the day, it's kind of like, I often compare us to a computer. Whatever you type in all day long, that's what comes out. So we have to ask ourselves, what are we typing in? In the same way, whatever we eat comes out. So what are we mentally eating all day long? It's better for me probably, instead of thinking over and over again about how bad my life is right now, say,
Mhm.
I may not like doing this. Sitting outside and watching the sunset may not sound fun, but I hear it's good for me. And I trust people to know that it's good for me. I mean, and then you do. I mean, it's like fruits and vegetables. Like, sorry to keep going back to that. I mean, I don't think anyone on the planet would argue with that point that they're better for you. It's like the other things taste better. So believe it or not, the depression and despair that you're feeling tastes better.
Mhm.
You're used to it. And so what you have to do is get unused to it. The beautiful thing about that is, yes, it's our fault when we're in despair. But the good news is it's our ability to get out of it. And no one can stop us. So we have the freedom to say, I don't want to live this way anymore. I'm going to begin to change. And then when we begin to do that, we do. And we can be in a prison, in solitary confinement and have beautiful lives. We can. When you realize that, the circumstances don't matter. I mean, again, there are just so many circumstances. If you go back in history, I mean, life used to be, 500 years ago, really hard. I mean, very, very challenging. And yet there were beautiful souls that lived back then. St. Francis of Assisi, Joan, there's just so many beautiful souls, Rumi, the Buddha. There's so many beautiful souls that have lived astonishingly well in incredibly hard times. So
Right.
to get that, we realize that this hardness is mostly being brought on wishing it was different. This is what it is. It's like, if you are living somewhere or you're in a thing where you're going through it. I mean, again, I'm not trying to be critical in any way. I'm more trying to say this is the path out. Stop reinforcing it. You're keeping yourself stuck there through your thoughts because
Right.
you're fighting what is. Stop fighting what is. It doesn't mean you can't do things to make it better, but do what makes it better. And then the rest of the time, let it go. Just leave it aside. And when you're really drawn towards thinking about it again and getting stuck in that quagmire of negativity, say, I can, but it's going to make me feel bad. And I'd rather feel good. I'm going to just stop reinforcing this negativity.
I love that. And you use the word, the $1 million word right there, feel, right? It makes me feel better when we do certain things. And I think I love the analogy that you've been using about the fruits and vegetables because you said, many people don't eat them. But, I think when we start to link what we're taking in, whether it's thoughts, whether it's the people we surround ourselves with, our environment, whatever it is, the food that we eat, when we start to see the link between that and how we feel, is when we start to make better choices. Every question I always run what I do through the filter of, does this move me forward? Right? Does this help me grow? Does this move me forward? What can I learn from this? And I think when we start seeing the world through those lenses, then we start to make different choices, right? We design our lives differently. So I'm trying to be mindful of your time here. We've got just a few minutes. I feel like I've loved every minute of our discussion and I could talk for hours more with you. But what I'd love to end on is kind of some thoughts on designing one's life. How can someone begin the process of designing their life to support their growth, to facilitate happiness? What are some things they can do on a daily basis to nourish their mind, body, and spirit? I know that there is no, it's not a formulaic approach. Everybody is individual. There's so many different ways that, people can design their lives. But can you give us just a brief menu? So what are some things people can do to incorporate in their life, actionable items that would help them start to make the shift towards happiness?
Yeah, my favorite word in the universe is called awareness. And what I mean by that is we can't change something unless we're aware of what we're doing. And most of us are very unaware of what we're doing. So to start with, just start paying attention and check in throughout the day and saying, okay, I'm in a bad mood. What am I thinking about?
Yeah.
I'm not very happy with my work. Why? You say, it's a terrible job, Dr. Buff. Well, why? What are you thinking about that make it terrible? Because I can guarantee I can find one person on the planet that could do that job and would be happy. There's always someone doing what you're struggling with right now and doing well. So you're reinforcing it, not to be judgmental, more like say, okay, I realized that, I had a lot of negative thoughts. And I came home and had a bottle of wine and watched, like just mindless news for hours. And I woke up and I couldn't figure out why I was in a bad mood. And the awareness would say, that may not have been very good for me. So maybe I'm going to turn off the TV, Maybe I'm gonna, start reading books, listen to beautiful music that's uplifting, meditating, getting outdoors. We begin to change. And when we begin to change, the word of encouragement I want to give to everyone listening, as much as, much of like an athlete, much as a couch potato is in pain when they don't work out, the athlete is in pain when they don't. And as much as someone who, like, I make a green smoothie, like literally this big, that I eat, that's my main part of my meal every day with fruits and vegetables. It's really good. And most people look at it, ugh, and I have grown incredibly accustomed to it because I've been drinking it for decades. So I like it rather than someone else would say, ugh. So it's like, well, the good news in that is we really get used to things. So mentally, as you begin to improve and get mentally healthier, what will happen is, we get attracted towards those things that are positive, that are uplifting. And when we see something negative, we kind of walk away. We just poo-poo it, or we set up boundaries. Sometimes we have to put up boundaries. We have to leave our jobs or leave relationships because it's negative. But we do things on focusing on, how do I make it so it's better? And we can make it better. I mean, if I can share a story, once, many, many years ago, when I first started, I worked with a young man. He was an old soul, but he was making bad choices by the friends he was hanging out with. He was young. And so he decided he needed to stop that because it was kind of frightening, the path he was on. And initially, he had no friends. I mean, like zero. And I just kept encouraging him, don't give up, don't give up. You'll find someone. And he did. And his neat thing was, like, because it was like 30 years ago, I ran into him like 10, 15 years later, and he was living the life that he wanted to live, and beautifully. So it takes time, it takes effort, but it's worth it. And the results, you just won't find someone and kind of like doing what you and I are doing and say, wow, my life sucks. You don't. Life is beautiful. And you get the positive effects of it because it doesn't matter what happens. You flow with whatever happens. So it's not that it looks a certain way. It's more that you and I, as you know, interact with the world in a certain way. That's what shifts.
Right. Amen to that. Such beautiful words of wisdom. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing those and for being a guest on my podcast. I have enjoyed every minute. If people would like to get in touch with you directly, what is the best way to do that?
Probably through my website, which is just happinesspodcast.org. That's happinesspodcast.org.
And to all of my viewers and listeners, I so appreciate you. I believe the time is a choice, and I'm grateful that you have carved time out of your day to be here with us and listen to all of the wonderful words of wisdom that Dr. Robert Puff has had to share with us today. Would love to have you join my Facebook group. We are found at liveauthentically.today/FB. Check out a copy of my book Soar on Amazon, and also one of Robert Puff's books, one of his 13, yes, you did hear that correctly, 13 books. Such a prolific author. I'm super proud of you. Check those out as well. And we will look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks and have a great day.